everyone. Welcome to the BPD Bunch Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I'm here with Hak Ja, Mo, Carys, and Katja. Where in the world is everyone coming from, and what is your brunchy beverage for the day?
I'm coming from New Jersey in the US, and I have some Olipop with me.
She only has one beverage, the beverage queen.
For once.
And I'm coming from Central Ohio, and I'm just drinking water.
I'm coming from Ontario, Canada, and I have water as well.
I'm coming from West Midlands in United Kingdom, and I have got orange pop.
Ooh, we're kind of matching.
I know.
And I'm coming from New Mexico, and I have half heavy cream, half coffee, with some pumpkin spice in there.
Oh my god.
For today's episode, we are doing another the BPD Bunch reacts to your mean comments. I'm very excited for this episode because my favorite mean comment of all time is in this one. So it's hard to say it without laughing because of the mental image that it gave me. So here's the comment. Psychobiches never reform fully. They lay in hibernation for another victim. So I don't know, I know it says hibernation, but in my mind, I imagine that I'm like hiding in the woods, just like waiting for somebody to jump out. And that was why I thought it was so funny.
It kind of made me think of Little Red Riding Hood and walking through the woods and like the wolf jumping out. I quite like that. That's quite nice imagery. It takes me back to my childhood.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see the kernel of truth in this is that, like, there are certainly those of us who have had a pattern of a trail of dysfunctional relationships, right? But I think that there's two issues that I sort of take with this comment. The first one is the never reform part is where I'm like, I think everyone on this show is living proof that, like, we can change and are not stuck being a certain way forever. And then the other part is like laying in wait, sort of like laying in hibernation for another victim, as if we do just like sit in the woods and wait for somebody to come by and then pounce on them like their prey, which to me carries an air of like, I don't know, intentionality. In my own mind, usually the narrative is very different. Like, I always imagined a beautiful, amazing relationship, and then I always felt very let down by the reality. It's not like I was sitting there waiting for someone to just destroy. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to invalidate the experience of the people who have been on the other end of me, because definitely in some of those relationships, that probably was their experience. They probably had a hard time understanding how somebody who claimed to love them could act this way. But it's just that I think we can talk about the intent, like one side, without having to invalidate the other.
I think also, like, with the imagery you guys are like giving with the Red Riding Hood, like us laying in wait in the woods, like, if you think about it that way and take it like more literal too, like, it's like animals feed on prey to survive, and like, yeah, we all need relationships to survive, so in that sense I guess you're right. But like, it's not like you said, the intention is not to harm, it's to survive. So that's also a different aspect of that.
I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before, but I think when I look back, there are a couple of relationships that I encouraged to go further than I had originally intended, because of that survival instinct. Because like my life situation was not in a stable place, or like my mind wasn't in a stable place, and I just needed some stability. And here was somebody providing it. And I think it is like a desperation thing sometimes. And it's definitely not something that was ever intentional, or even something that Like, I'm only being aware of it now for the first time. Like, I am right now years old when I'm realizing, like, what was actually at the root of that.
The only way I was able to, like, quote unquote forgive myself for my any kind of past really toxic behaviors was like, listen, I did what I had to do to survive, like, with the knowledge that I have. It's not that it was right, but, like, I can understand that I was just trying to keep my head above water, you know.
Yeah.
You ready for the next one? There's a lot of these are pretty similar because these are like, this is like the main thing, but BPDs don't have relationships. They have victims that they use.
I mean, it seems like the narrative here is like a lot of people think that we're seeking out our next victim and like we were hurting people on purpose, and we're not. Like, we are hurting too. And I don't want to invalidate the other side of this or anything, because I know we can be pretty destructive, but that's not what BPD is. We are not intentionally trying to hurt people.
I think it's quite interesting because I still have some very good relationships with ex-partners, like not all of them obviously, but quite a few that I've had really significant long-term relationships with, and we still talk. And quite often, you know, we do talk about the relationship that we had, what went wrong. And I think there's definitely some learning there on both sides, because I feel like those relationships that I had, even though the dynamic now as friends is completely different than when we were in a relationship, I've taken something from that relationship and they have too. I mean, obviously, when you remain friendly with someone, you are going to see the positive sides of. Assuming if you asked an ex that I'm not in touch with how they felt, they would say something completely different. But I think there's always something in there, even if a relationship has been really damaging, that there's something that you can take from that so you know what to avoid in the future. And that's not avoiding accountability for, say, my actions. But I would hope that even in the relationships that have crashed and burned, that person has then been like, okay, I know what I don't want in a future relationship and know what to avoid. I mean, it's not a great thing to be known for, but I would hope that that has at least helped them.
I don't know about you all, but Katja kind of touched on this a little bit. I think a lot of my relationships have been very different. You know, it's not like every relationship was this horrific mess. The different people I've had relationships with have, because just by nature of who they are, have brought out different sides of me. And certain people have been more conducive to intense reactions than some other people have. And I'm not like, oh, it's your fault, right? Like, if somebody is more conducive, say, to a bad reaction from me, like, it is on me to be aware of that and step away from the situation. And the reality is that different dynamics exist within different relationships. Like, maybe some are totally fine and others, it has that crash and burn quality because it's just not a good match of temperaments.
There's a learning curve with everything. Like, even just in a regular relationship, like, communication styles are going to be different. Love languages are going to be different. Like, it's not that black and white. It's not that simple. It's not just because we have BPD. Like, relationships are difficult in general. And I don't think that that's necessarily we're just the problem here. It's just neither party is usually equipped for that. You know what I mean? Like, we both have to go through this learning curve. Like, as a person with BPD, we make it more, like, it's more important to, like, talk about these things that maybe other people are not talking about right at the get-go in their relationships, like how to, like, emotionally regulate each other, like, what are boundaries for arguments. Like, I feel like most people don't really, like, talk about that until it becomes an issue, and I get it. It's frustrating, it's tiring. Like, I always tell, like, new partners, like, listen, there is a different kind of, like, expectation. It is going to be a little bit harder, like, initially, but once we understand each other, like, we're good.
You know, one of the things it reminds me of, I feel like, I mean, Carys, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I feel like I hear a lot of stories from you and your partner about, like, co-regulating and all of the things that you two have done, that, like, this very intentional conversation about how you're going to handle certain aspects of your relationship.
Yeah. We have, like, right at the very beginning, it was literally our first date. We were having like a great time. Like, obviously there was some smooching and stuff, and like, you know, we were like really like connecting on an intellectual level as well. And it was like at that point in like the evening, and I was just kind of like, I kind of want to know where this is headed. And so he's just like, this is like, these are my boundaries, my expectations. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what I'm looking for. And this is like my boundaries and expectations. And we sat and we just kind of compared notes. And because of my ability to be vulnerable with him and his choice to reciprocate by being vulnerable with me, it allowed both of us to be able to like open up and trust one another. And like from that moment, like we made a promise to each other. It's like, we're never going to leave, and nothing's ever like done in a day. So like we figure it out. That's just who we are and what we do.
We should move on to the next one. This one is about us being the victim or playing the victim. Stop acting like a victim. We sit in this too. The difference is we have no ammo against narcissists. You're in the same category as those. You're more like them than normal peeps. Understand you're the problem, not your partner. Before you complain on people, not be complicit towards your self-serving needs.
I don't like this one.
There is a kernel of truth to it, though, right? We are in the cluster B, like, group. So that person's not totally, like, wrong when they say that. Like, we are in the same group as narcissists. And I know, like, that might be a tough pill to swallow, but, you know, the symptoms of all of those, like, personality disorders, like, overlap. But just because that's true that we are, like, in the same group as NPD, it doesn't mean that we're, like, untreatable or that we're not aware of it and that we're not trying to manage that, you know?
Katya's making a face.
What'd I do?
Katya just has a furrowed eyebrow, and it's just, I'm just like, what is the subtitle?
It's just like confusion, because I'm like, well, I'm cluster A too, so where do I fit in? But no, I think obviously we are part of the same cluster for a reason. But I do think, you know, like reading those kind of comments, you do have to realise that yes, we can be very destructive in relationships, and I think it's a bit short-sighted to not appreciate the damage that can do to other people. And although obviously we're in a bit of a slightly different position being in remission from BPD, like when I hear or see comments like that, I just kind of pick up on the pain that's behind it. So I do have sympathy for people who feel that way, because to be in a situation where you are with somebody with BPD who is not willing to make that change, it can feel like you're banging your head up a brick wall. And I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, you know, I'm the one with BPD, I'm suffering. But yes, you also have to appreciate that it does impact the people around you. I mean, I'm in functional recovery from BPD, but I still have symptoms that still have a negative impact on the people around me. And I have to appreciate that and be aware of it and be willing to respond to that when it does come up as an issue.
Yeah, I think for me, the primary reason I include comments like this is mostly just because of the very all or nothing language, right? Like if you think about it, our whole channel is very recovery focused. So to get a comment like this, it's like painting everyone with the same brush. I do not want to invalidate your experience, because clearly, you know, as Katya said, you've probably been through it. And we are not the person that you dated. If we are talking about something, like there's a lot of our episodes where we are unpacking our past behaviors and talking about how we thought at the time. That is not us currently acting like a victim. Like, I'll admit, yeah, there were times where I definitely put myself in the victim place. I had a victim mentality. It was like, why me? Why is everybody doing this to me? Not realizing that there were a lot of situations that I had created for myself. Right? But me talking about that version of me that existed then is not the same thing as me acting the victim now. So coming at us and being like, stop acting the victim, it's a little bit like, I think you're projecting your experience because maybe something one of us said reminded you of somebody you knew. And I'm really, really sorry that you had to go through that, and we are not that person.
I think with those kind of comments as well, it's difficult because we as individuals, or even as a collective as the BPD bunch, there's nothing that we can actually physically do to help that person and the way that they feel. Like, that might be maybe a conversation to have with somebody who is a professional, because like we can't do anything about their experience.
I know I have been a victim. I have been very abused in relationships in the past. I still get called the crazy monster who pursues victims. And it does such things inside my brain that I don't even have the language to describe it, because it's so deep and twisty-turny. And I don't know who actually the victim really is. So I had to move beyond that point and realize that it doesn't matter, because I am responsible for my outcomes, regardless of the actions of others.
Sometimes I read some of these comments and I'm like, you know, the tone and the way that you are communicating now sounds an awful lot like the BPD person that you are complaining about.
Yes.
Especially like public comments, right? Like, it's an odd choice to me to be like, I'm just going to drag this person who you, the video people, don't know. I'm going to drag this other person through the mud, essentially. Maybe directly or indirectly. Is the person not just perpetuating that which they are upset about when they do that?
When I feel like that about somebody, I write it in a note and talk to my therapist about it. I don't write it on the internet as like in the comment section of a YouTube video.
Okay, so here's another one. So what if they promise you 1,000,000 times that they will help and barely do the minimum? Then when you get pissed off, they blame you for being aggressive. Are these people not understanding that when they live with another person, they cannot just do and act however they want, and the other person just needs to accept it? I'm wondering if BPD is just an excuse to blame people who are perpetually disrespected into just pacifying them and settling for less. At this point, I don't know anymore how the other person takes it as long as they do the job. The only issue is the stress I feel from raging at them.
Buddy, you might have BPD. Ooh.
Right? Like, why are you raging?
From what I understand, it sounds like the person with BPD isn't doing things they're supposed to do. The person who doesn't have BPD is nagging them about it. And then the person with BPD gets mad at the other person for all of the nagging. And then the person who did the asking is upset because the things aren't getting done and they're getting yelled at. That's how I interpreted that. I don't know if...
It sounds like no matter what the situation is, both sides are a little bit dysfunctional, and maybe both people could use therapy and a little bit of like self-reflection, and maybe like part ways and both of you like get help and do what you need to do, like to not be so like dysfunctional.
Honestly, I don't think this is a BPD issue. I feel like this is a communication issue and a self-regulation issue in general. I had to learn how to not let things bubble up inside and like keep things bottled up for too long to the point where I explode. Like, that's what I'm hearing, like when this person is saying like they're raging and they feel like they have no other choice. Like, it sounds very clear to me you're letting it get to a certain point to where your only response is these aggressive comments. I get the frustration, but that's not how you communicate. It's never going to be acceptable to do that, like whether you have BPD or not. That's why immediacy is so important, in the sense of like, as soon as you're upset by something, to communicate about it, right? Like, both people are going to be dysregulated if you're waiting and then letting these things build up. I mean, anger used like that, not necessary. You know what I mean? Like, you could have found another way to talk about it without resorting to anger. It's just you yourself haven't learned to put up boundaries, and then you explode. But that's not a BPD thing. Mm-mm.
I was kind of with it until the end, and then it was like the rage, because like rage is big anger, right? If you're raging towards someone, that's big. That's a big feeling.
What's interesting to me is the word choices. I pulled it up so I can study it. Because the word choice, then when you get pissed off, they blame you for being aggressive. So the commenter took ownership of their aggression in the very first sentence. They're like, listen, my frustration builds up because I just can't handle it anymore. And then they get mad because I'm aggressive. But like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, people get aggressive. It's not my fault. I wouldn't have been aggressive if they weren't like this. They're like, oh yeah, well, you have to rage. No, you actually don't. You can problem solve.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this doesn't seem like a BPD thing at all. This is like a miscommunication. Like, this is
learning how to have effective communication. It's a communication skills issue.
Yeah.
So there was one that was directed at me. So the comment is, projecting responsibility onto others, quite a common sign of BPD. I pray for your ex's well-being and pray that he can heal from the mentally taxing relationship with you. I wish he never falls for another BPD and PD like you. My first response was, not a man, LOL. And I did not get a thing of the whole thread, but basically their response was like, fine, I hope that she's like doing better without you or whatever. And I said, me too. I'm grateful to not be in that, and I really wish for her to have the best. And then they went on this long tangent about how it's so obvious that I'm just trying to win in this argument, and how people like this commenter who are empaths are the victims of people like me. I basically just responded with like, I'm not trying to win. I'm agreeing with you. Like, I hope she's doing well. And also, I haven't qualified for a BPD diagnosis in like 4 years, so I don't know what and then they deleted their original comment. But I got a screenshot, so.
Well, I don't understand people who leave like super nasty comments from the get-go. Clearly you're mad and you have something to say, but then you like leave a heart face and happy face emoji at the end. Like, you're clearly there just to argue and just to like try to get under someone's skin.
Some people like to just be aggressive, I guess.
Yeah. Can you blame them when they tell us to do the thing so many times and we just don't?
Yeah. I mean, of course, two wrongs definitely make a right. If somebody is mean to you, you are totally entitled to go on the internet and leave scathing comments for strangers you don't know. How could we blame you? Okay, so the last mean comment for this episode. Notice how, this was on the breakups episode, by the way, just for the context. Notice how all their partners are abusive, LOL, yet most exes of people with BPD have been abused by them. They do smear campaigns as well. These people are complete liars and just evil.
Mm.
I'm laughing because just like the extremity of this comment is absurd to me.
The whole thing's hyperbole.
Yeah, it's like, look, I am legitimately sorry for whoever, like, for whatever happened to you. Like, that must have been horrible. And also, like, this comment makes the assumption that, like, there's either one person is the abuser or somebody else is the abuser. And in my experience, this is just for me, personally, the majority of the toxic relationships were mutually abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was not one person or the other, it was both. There are some situations in which I was abused, but those were not long-term relationships. The long-term relationships were mutually abusive. And so I think it's odd that the person makes it sound like I can't have an abusive ex and have also been abusive. It's either that I was abusive or they were abusive.
That sounds like BPD black and white thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it, not me. Katya, you've been very quiet.
I mean, I was just thinking back to my relationships, really, and like I would say, and I'm pretty confident in saying this because I do have a good relationship with quite a few of my exes, that actually abuse hasn't figured, really. I think a lot of the time it's been the way that my symptoms present from both of my personality disorders causes massive problems in communication, and that's where the issue has been. So, you know, there's maybe possibly one relationship that could be considered abusive, but I definitely don't look at all of my relationships and think that all of my exes were abusers, because for the most part they're actually pretty nice people. It was just that, as we said earlier in the episode, you know, like, you're just not right for each other. It doesn't have to be about an abuse dynamic on either side. Yes, it can be, depending on how somebody's symptoms present and how the other person responds to it, but I definitely don't identify too well with this idea of all relationships with people with BPD being abusive, because that's not been my experience. And, you know, I do have these friendships with people that I've been involved in, and I do trust their opinion on it as well when we've discussed it. So I'm not painting myself out to be an angel or an exception or anything like that. I'm just saying that a lot of the time, especially for people with BPD who are on a journey to healing, it's just the ups and downs of relationships. It doesn't have to be an abuse dynamic.
Seriously, it's the breakups episode. So we're going to be talking about hard breakups. And a lot of our hard breakups are hard because they were abusive relationships. We weren't asked to come on and talk about the relationships that went really great and just like fizzled out because we grew apart. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the venue for that type of conversation. So to come on the breakups episode and rant about how they're all like this, well, no, they're not. And they specifically not for this episode. Like, why don't we have, you know what, Xannie, what a great idea for an episode. Great relationships that just fizzled out and ended. I'm sure everyone will tune in to watch that.
Sounds great. People will totally be on the edge of their seat.
I think that's the thing, like, leading on from what Carys said, with those kind of episodes, there will always be people who have got an axe to grind that aren't necessarily coming to that episode to find answers or insight or understand the dynamic of their own relationship. They are coming to essentially hammer and nail. That's like the only way that I can describe it. Like, they're not looking for anything useful to take from that episode. It is all about their own feelings about their own relationship. And, you know, we could have filmed an episode talking about how we are responsible for absolutely everything that ever goes wrong in a relationship and we're terrible people, and you would still get people taking that even further in the comments section. So yes, it is important to be accountable for when you have done wrong in a relationship, but ultimately I'm not sure that everybody in the comment section is there for the right reasons.
Yeah, this is, as an aside, this is one of our hate watchers who randomly will like watch an episode and leave a hate comment. We have a couple of hate watchers. And so I actually kind of love them in a weird way, because like they're still increasing our views. I guess I'll just say thank you to our hate commenters for leaving these comments. As much as we're saying that, you know, your comments are not the most appropriate in our comments section, like, you are watching our videos, so thank you. I seriously mean that. Thank you for watching and for commenting.
I hope the hate watchers, specifically this one that you called out, are our hate watcher. I really hope they watch this episode. Yeah. Because, like, not in a confrontational way, although I'm sure that is a possible interpretation, but as to understand a little bit more about the journey that we're on as humans and growth and like different points in our recoveries. Like, all 5 of us have very unique paths that we've led so far. And we have some things that are similar and some things that are vastly different from one another. And to say all people with BPD are like X, Y, and Z, like just by our answers to these comments, you can tell that we're not. So yeah, maybe we're all just like really good at pretending. But it would be exhausting. I don't have that kind of energy.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of energy either.
I think if I was going to add anything, it would be from a personal perspective. Like, hate and anger and resentment are really destructive feelings. Like, they will consume you, they will eat you up and rob you of quality of life. So I guess if I was going to say anything, if you feel that strongly about us and about people with BPD, take that energy and put it into doing something that will make you happy, because trust me, your life will be so much easier. I'm not someone who's ever left hate comments on videos or Instagram posts or whatever, but I do definitely relate to those really horrible feelings that build up and really do not do you any favours at all. So a little bit of friendly advice would be, you know, take that energy and go and do something with it away from the internet, because it will make your life so much richer.
I feel like anger specifically, it also serves a purpose too. It's not just like this thing that we should avoid, but you have to also learn how to use it constructively, right? Like, if you don't use your anger and like realize what it's trying to tell you, you're always gonna run into the same issues and you're always gonna feel this way, and nothing's ever really gonna change whether you're with someone with BPD or not.
This isn't to like the hateful comments. This is for the people who have BPD or who love someone with BPD and they read those hateful comments. Don't let it get to you. As you can see on this show, like, we're not letting it get to us. Like, sure, it's frustrating to see that people are like generalizing us like that and making assumptions about us, especially when we're here, like, you know, being so open and honest about our experiences and where we went wrong and what we've learned. Like, it's frustrating to see, but if you read those comments and it like brings you down, you know, as someone with BPD, then stop reading them, because not everyone is like hateful and judgmental. And you know, as we've said before, a lot of those comments are coming from a place of anger and hurt, because those people have been hurt by someone with BPD. So none of us are monsters just because we have BPD. And even though we may have done shady things, we're not bad people. So yeah, just focus on healing and focus on growth and love, and forget about the hateful people, you know?
I don't think there's anything I can add. Everyone pretty much covered it. So we'll just say thank you, everyone, so much for watching. We hope you got a nugget of fun and wisdom to take with you on your journey. And we will see you next time.